The cameras followed Kalen's every move. 37 in total. He'd counted them all during his years of confinement in Neo-Viridia's restricted zone. He knew their blind spots, their rotation patterns, the slight delay between feeds. This knowledge gave him small freedoms in an otherwise tightly controlled existence. He stood at the reinforced window of his living quarters, looking out at the sterile white corridors and vacant common areas of the facility. The guards called it accommodations. Kalen called it what it was, a prison for monsters. Raising his hand, he watched the faint blue glow pulse beneath his skin, veins illuminated with a light that shouldn't exist in any human body. The cybernetic enhancements merged with his nervous system had saved his life after the accident, but the experimental procedure had changed him in ways the scientists hadn't anticipated. His presence now disrupted electronic systems, and his touch could transmit electrical surges powerful enough to kill. The guards wore insulated suits when they had to approach him. They spoke to him through intercoms, slid his meals through automated delivery systems, and watched him with expressions of disgust barely concealed beneath professional masks. Asset K-12, remain in your quarters. We have a new arrival procedure in Sector 4, announced a monotone voice through the speaker system. Kalen lowered his hand. A new arrival. Those were rare in the restricted zone. The Supreme Oversight Committee that governed Neo-Viridia preferred to rehabilitate anomalies through pharmaceutical means or failing that quiet disposal. Only the most valuable or dangerous specimens ended up here. Curiosity, one of the few luxuries he still permitted himself, drew him closer to the window. From his vantage point, he could see a section of the arrival bay if he pressed against the far corner of the glass. The commotion was immediate. Twice the normal guard presence, specialists in hazmat suits, and unusually, a member of the Purity Council itself, identifiable by the pristine white uniform with gold trim. Whatever they were bringing in, it mattered. The transport vehicle was unlike anything Kalen had seen before, a sealed, spherical container with no apparent openings, hovering several feet above the ground. It emitted a soft, pulsing light that shifted through colors he couldn't quite name. "Stand back," ordered the council member, voice amplified through external speakers. "Prepare containment field at maximum intensity." The guards formed a wider perimeter, weapons raised. A scientist approached the sphere, holding what appeared to be a remote control. With a series of precise movements, she activated a sequence that caused the sphere to split along invisible seams. Kalen held his breath. Inside was a humanoid figure, female in appearance but clearly not human. Her skin was an iridescent silver blue that seemed to shift and shimmer even in the harsh facility lighting. Where hair should be, delicate tendrils moved gently as if underwater, their color changing from deep purple to luminescent teal. Her eyes, 3 of them, with the third centered slightly above where human eyebrows would be, were entirely black except for pinpricks of white light that seemed to capture the stars themselves. She was both terrifying and the most beautiful being Kalen had ever seen. The alien woman stood perfectly still as the containment field activated around her. Her expression was unreadable to Kalen, but something in her posture spoke of resignation rather than fear. Xylosian female, approximately equivalent to human age 25, announced a scientist, reading from a tablet. Subject demonstrates class of psychic abilities, including uncontrolled telepathic invasion and possible reality distortion. All personnel maintain neural dampening protocols at all times. The Purity Council member stepped forward, staying just outside the containment field. "You understand our language?" The alien woman, the Xylosian, nodded once, a surprisingly human gesture. "I am Counselor Mercer. You are now in a secure facility where your abilities will be studied and contained for the safety of our citizens. Cooperation will improve your conditions. Resistance will be met with consequences. Do you understand?" Again, a single nod. "What is your designation?" Mercer asked. For the first time, the alien spoke. Her voice carried a harmonic quality, as if multiple tones spoke at once. "In your sound patterns, I am called Lyra." "Very well, Subject L1. You will be processed and placed in isolation until we complete initial assessments. Kaylin watched as they moved her toward the specialized containment cells several corridors away from his own quarters. Just as she was about to disappear from his view, her head turned, and those star-filled eyes seemed to look directly at him through the reinforced glass. Something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, or merely the acknowledgement of one caged creature to another. Then she was gone, escorted away by the guards and their humming containment field. Kaylin stepped away from the window, his heart racing with an unfamiliar rhythm. He hadn't felt such intensity of emotion in years. The Supreme Oversight Committee had long ago determined that emotional volatility increased the risk of his powers manifesting uncontrollably, so his food was laced with suppressants. Yet now, he felt a spark of something dangerous and forgotten: curiosity, concern, connection. Later that night, when the facility quieted to its night cycle, Kaylin retrieved the small, fuzzy creature he'd been secretly nursing back to health. He'd found it injured in the small outdoor exercise yard 3 weeks ago, some kind of mutated rodent that had somehow breached the perimeter. By all regulations, he should have reported it immediately for extermination. Instead, he had hidden it, treated its wounded leg with supplies stolen from the medical bay, and kept it fed with scraps from his meals. "We have a new neighbor," he whispered to the creature as it nuzzled against his palm. His enhanced body didn't intimidate the little animal. It seemed to enjoy the gentle warmth his cybernetics generated. Someone else they fear. Someone. He paused, searching for words. Someone like me. The creature chittered softly in response, its tiny eyes reflecting the blue glow of Kaylin's veins. In that moment, in the darkness of his quarters with only a contraband pet as witness, Kaylin made a decision that would shatter the carefully constructed walls of his isolated existence. He would find a way to connect with the alien called Lyra. Over the next several days, Kaylin observed the patterns of guards and scientists around Lyra's containment area. The facility had increased security protocols dramatically, but Kaylin had years of experience finding weaknesses in their systems. He discovered that Lyra was kept in a specialized cell with psionic dampening technology. She was allowed no direct contact with personnel. All communication happened through intercom systems, and her meals were delivered by automated drones. Camera footage showed her sitting motionless for hours, those star-filled eyes staring at nothing. Occasionally, her tendrils would ripple with color changes that seemed to correspond with emotional states. Deep blues and purples when she was alone, harsh reds when scientists conducted tests through the barrier. 3 times daily, they ran what they called containment assessments, painful-looking procedures where they would intensify the psionic field until Lyra showed visible distress, then record the threshold. Kaylin recognized the pattern. They had done similar tests on him when he first arrived, pushing his electrical outputs to dangerous levels to map his capabilities. On the 6th day, Kaylin made his first move. Using a maintenance shaft he discovered years ago, but never had reason to exploit, he gained access to the environmental control system for Lyra's cell block. With careful manipulation, gentle enough not to trigger alarms, he adjusted the temperature to something slightly warmer. The records he'd accessed indicated Xylosians preferred higher ambient temperatures than humans. The next day, surveillance showed Lyra looking slightly more alert, her tendrils shifting through gentler color patterns. Encouraged, Kaylin decided to risk more. During his next scheduled maintenance duty, the only real work they allowed him to perform, ironically because his electrical nature made him useful for certain delicate tasks, he managed to divert a small package into the automated food delivery system headed for Lyra's cell. Inside was a single exotic fruit from the greenhouse section, something not on the approved nutrition plan for either of them, and a small crystal he'd found and kept hidden for years because its reflective properties reminded him of the stars he no longer saw. Kaylin held his breath as he watched the surveillance feed from his terminal. When the package arrived with her standard nutrient tray, Lyra stared at it for a long time without moving. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched the crystal. Her tendrils flashed with bright blues and golds, colors he hadn't seen from her before. She looked directly at the camera, and for a moment, Kaylin felt as if she were looking at him. She placed the crystal in the center of her small table, where it caught the light, and carefully ate the fruit, savoring each bite in a way that made Kaylin realize how long it had been since anyone had given her something simply for pleasure. Over the next 2 weeks, Kaylin continued his covert assistance. He learned to correlate her tendril colors with emotional states and used that knowledge to time his interventions. He discovered ways to interfere with the most painful assessment procedures without raising suspicion. A malfunction, here, a power fluctuation. There. Once, when a particularly cruel scientist scheduled an extended testing sequence, Kaylin managed to trigger a facility-wide environmental control recalibration that forced a postponement. That night, he left her another gift, a small electronic device he'd modified that emitted subtle harmonic frequencies. The surveillance showed her holding it to her chest, her tendrils flowing with peaceful turquoise waves. Lyra began to leave her own messages. After discovering the first gift, she started arranging objects in her cell in patterns that seemed random to the casual observer but formed distinct geometric shapes when viewed from certain angles on the surveillance feeds. Angles only Kaylin would notice during his maintenance access. One pattern led him to discover a small note hidden in the return food tray, written in an elegant script. To the unseen one who brings warmth, thank you. The connection between them grew stronger, even though they had never spoken or been in the same room. Kaylin found himself living for the moments he could watch her on the monitors, interpreting her tendril colors, planning his next intervention. For the first time since his transformation, he felt something beyond the numbed existence the committee had designed for him. Then came a day everything changed. Kaylin was monitoring the feeds when he saw a group of scientists and 2 council members enter the observation room adjacent to Lyra's cell. Their expressions were grave, their movements precise and practiced. "Begin final assessment protocol," ordered Counselor Mercer. "We've gathered sufficient data on passive containment. It's time to evaluate response to extreme stimuli." Kaylin felt cold dread as a technician brought forward a device he recognized, the pain inducer they had used on him during his early days, before deciding his electrical nature made him too valuable to risk permanent damage. The device was designed to stimulate every pain receptor in the body simultaneously while leaving no physical trace. Commencing at level 1, announced the scientist, activating the device. On the monitor, Lyra's body went rigid, her tendrils flashing crimson and black. She made no sound, but her 3 eyes widened in obvious agony. "Increase to level 2, came the order. Kaylin moved without conscious thought. He placed his hand on the main power junction for the entire sector and, for the first time in years, deliberately channeled the electrical energy he usually kept carefully controlled. The surge was massive. Every system in the eastern quadrant of the facility went dark instantly. Emergency generators kicked in seconds later, but by then Kaylin was already moving through the maintenance shafts, heading toward Lyra's cell block. He knew he had minutes at most before they realized the failure wasn't accidental. The backup systems would have gaps, blind spots in the surveillance. He had mapped them all over years of patient observation, never thinking he would actually use the knowledge. When he reached the access panel near Lyra's cell, the emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. The psionic containment field was operating at minimum capacity due to the power constraints. Kaylin overrode the door mechanism with another controlled electrical pulse and slipped inside. Lyra was huddled in the corner of her cell, tendrils wrapped protectively around her body, their color a deep midnight blue shot through with silver. When the door opened, she looked up, her 3 eyes widening at the sight of him. "You," she whispered, her harmonic voice barely audible. "The warmth bringer, the shadow helper." Kaylin stayed near the door, aware that his proximity could be dangerous to her. "They were hurting you. I couldn't let them continue." Her tendrils unfurled slightly, shifting toward a questioning purple. "Why would you risk yourself? Why would you touch the systems for a monster like me?" The question struck Kaylin deeply. How many times had he asked himself the same thing, wondering why anyone would come near a dangerous aberration like himself. "Because I see you," he said simply. "Not what they say you are." Lyra rose slowly to her feet, moving with a fluid grace that reminded Kalen of water in zero gravity. "They say my touch brings madness, that my mind will consume yours. They say my touch brings death," Kalen responded, the blue glow beneath his skin pulsing more visibly in the dim light. "That my energy will stop your heart." They stood facing each other across the small cell, two beings deemed too dangerous for human contact, separated by fear and conditioning. "We don't have much time," Kalen said, glancing toward the corridor. "They'll realize this wasn't an accident soon." Lyra nodded, then did something unexpected. She extended her hand toward him, stopping just short of contact. "I want to know," she said. "I want to know if they lie about this too." Kalen stared at her outstretched hand. Every instinct conditioned into him over years of containment screamed to back away. His electrical nature could kill her instantly. Her telepathic abilities could destroy his mind. Everything they had been taught said this contact was suicidal for both of them. "Why would you touch a monster like me?" she whispered, echoing his own deepest fears. In answer, Kalen slowly raised his hand. Blue energy coursed visibly through his fingers as he moved toward her. He hesitated a breath away from contact, their eyes locked in a moment of mutual terror and hope. Then, in a single motion that defied years of warnings and fear, their hands met. The sensation was immediate, but nothing like either had been told to expect. Instead of pain or destruction, the contact created a circuit, a loop of energy that flowed between them. Kalen's electrical nature seemed to stabilize the chaotic psychic energy that surrounded Lyra, while her telepathic field channeled and contained his electricity in ways his cybernetic systems never could. Images and feelings flooded between them. Kalen's memories of his accident, the experimental procedure that saved and damned him, years of isolation and longing. Lyra's experiences as a refugee from a dying world, her capture by humans who feared what they couldn't understand, the constant pressure of minds against hers that she couldn't fully block. They stood frozen in mutual revelation, hands clasped, as their two supposedly incompatible natures found an impossible harmony. "They lied," Lyra said finally, her voice filled with wonder. "About everything." The moment was shattered by the blare of alarms. The facility's systems had reset, and their unauthorized proximity had been detected. "We have to move," Kalen said urgently, reluctantly breaking the physical connection. "Follow me. I know a place they don't monitor." He led her through service corridors and maintenance shafts, using his ability to disrupt surveillance systems as they moved. They reached a small room deep in the infrastructure level, a forgotten maintenance hub Kalen had discovered years ago and converted into a personal sanctuary. "We'll be safe here temporarily," he explained as they entered the cramped space. "No active surveillance, and the walls contain enough lead shielding to block most scans." Lyra looked around with interest at the small collection of objects Kalen had gathered over the years. Books salvaged from disposal, small mechanical projects, and a little nest where his furry companion was currently sleeping. "You've created a home within the prison," she observed, her tendrils now shifting through curious yellows and interested greens. "It helped me remember I was still something more than what they defined me as," Kalen replied. They sat across from each other in the small space, still processing the revelation of their touch. Lyra's telepathic presence remained at the edge of Kalen's consciousness, not invasive but perceptible, like knowing someone was in the next room. "Your mind is beautiful," she said suddenly, "ordered yet creative, disciplined but kind." Kalen felt an unfamiliar warmth in his cheeks. "Your energy feels like music," he responded. "Complex patterns that somehow make perfect sense." They spent hours talking, sharing their stories in full for the first time. Kalen learned that Lyra was considered unusual even among her own people. Her telepathic abilities too strong, too difficult to control. She had been a researcher studying interspecies communication when her ship was damaged and forced to land on Earth. Instead of the scientific exchange she had hoped for, she was immediately classified as a threat and contained. Kalen told her about his former life as an electrical engineer, his accident while working on experimental power system, and a cybernetic integration that saved his life but left him with abilities that frightened even those who had created them. The Oversight Committee's fundamental doctrine is purity through control, Kalen explained. Anything they can't control is impure, dangerous, to be contained or eliminated. On my world, we have a concept called harmonic chaos, Lyra responded, her tendrils forming complex patterns as she spoke. The understanding that some systems must remain partially unpredictable to achieve their highest function. Your committee would find the idea heretical. As they talked, they experimented cautiously with physical proximity. Each touch created the same harmonizing effect. Her psychic energy and his electrical nature forming a balanced circuit rather than destroying each other. They discovered that sustained contact allowed them to share thoughts and sensations directly, without the barriers of language. When Kalen's small furry friend awoke and cautiously approached Lyra, she laughed with delight, a sound like wind chimes that resonated in the small room. Through their connection, Kalen felt her joy as, if it were his own, we should name him, Lyra suggested as the creature climbed onto her lap, completely unafraid of her alien nature. I've always just called him Little One, Kalen admitted. Naming him felt too permanent, like acknowledging he might stay when I knew he should be free. Lyra's tendrils shifted to a thoughtful blue. Perhaps Nexus, then, a connection point between different worlds. Neither permanent nor temporary, but important. Kalen smiled, another expression that felt unfamiliar after so long. Nexus it is. Their peaceful interlude couldn't last. By the next facility cycle, the entire restricted zone had been placed on lockdown. Announcements blared continuously about a dangerous security breach and two highly volatile assets in proximity. From their hiding place, they monitored the facility's communications. The Supreme Oversight Committee had declared a Level 1 emergency, the highest possible threat assessment. Teams of specially equipped guards were systematically searching every section of the facility. They're afraid of us together, Lyra observed, watching the security feeds Kalen had managed to access. More than they fear us separately. Because together, we've broken their narrative, Kalen replied, his hand entwined with hers. If we aren't what they've claimed, if we can touch without destruction, what else have they lied about? His terminal beeped with an incoming high-priority communication. It was addressed directly to him, bypassing normal protocols. Cautiously, Kalen opened it. The message was from Dr. Elias Reed, the scientist who had overseen Kalen's cybernetic integration years ago, before the Oversight Committee had taken full control of the project. K-12. If you're accessing communications, read carefully. Committee has authorized lethal force against both assets. They're preparing a specialized containment team with neural disruptors and electrical dampening fields. They'll find you within hours. There's another option. Meet me at the old lab. Section C, 7, Sublevel 3. I can help. Lyra, who had read the message through their connection, looked at Kalen with concern. Is this a trap? Possibly, Kalen acknowledged. But Dr. Reed was different from the others. He fought against my complete isolation, argued that my condition could be managed without containment. The committee removed him from my case when he became too vocal. What's in Section C7? Lyra asked. The original cybernetics lab, where I was transformed. Kalen hadn't been back there since his initial recovery period. It was decommissioned years ago when the committee centralized all research in the new wings. They debated briefly, but the decision was clear. Staying hidden would only delay the inevitable. If there was even a chance of assistance, they had to take it. Moving through the facility was increasingly difficult. Guard patrols had doubled, and every security system was operating at maximum sensitivity. Twice they nearly walked into patrols and had to retreat into maintenance shafts or empty rooms. When they finally reached Section C7, the area was as abandoned as Kalen remembered. Dust-covered and used equipment, and the lighting operated at minimum emergency levels. casting long shadows across once sterile surfaces. Dr. Reed was waiting in the main laboratory, his thin frame tense with anxiety. He startled when they entered, his eyes widening at the sight of them together, hands joined. "It's true then," he said quietly. "You've achieved symbiotic stability." Kalen nodded. "Your message said you could help us." Reed gestured to a terminal he had activated. "The committee is lying to the public, to most of the staff, even to themselves. Your conditions were never about public safety. It was always about weaponization potential." He brought up classified files, research protocols, experimental designs, deployment scenarios, plans to replicate Kalen's electrical abilities in controlled subjects, analyses of how Lyra's telepathic capabilities could be harnessed for intelligence operations. When initial attempts to weaponize you individually proved too difficult, the committee classified you as containment-only assets, Reed explained. But they've been collecting data all along, looking for weaknesses, methods of control. "And now?" Lyra asked, her tendrils shifting anxiously. "Now, they're terrified because you've demonstrated something they thought impossible. Symbiotic harmony between powers they couldn't separately control. They'll never let you live freely after this. The authorization for lethal force is genuine." Kalen felt Lyra's fear through their connection, but also her resolve. "What are you proposing, Doctor?" Reed turned to a large piece of equipment covered by a dust sheet. "This was the prototype neural cybernetic amplifier, the original device we used in your procedure, Kalen. I've modified it with Lyra's telepathic abilities. Serving as a stabilizer, we could potentially enhance your combined capabilities enough to breach the facility's external defenses." "You're suggesting we escape," Kalen said, the concept almost incomprehensible after years of accepting his confinement as permanent. "Not just escape," Reed replied grimly. "The committee must be exposed. They've been conducting illegal experiments on dozens of anomalous subjects, violating every ethical standard. The data is all here, but it needs to reach the Global Oversight Authority." "Why help us?" Lyra asked, her three eyes studying the human intently. "You risk everything." Reed's expression hardened. "Because I helped create this abomination of a system, believing we were protecting humanity. By the time I realized what the committee really intended, I was too complicit to simply walk away. This is my penance." The next hours passed in tense preparation. Reed explained his plan. Using the modified amplifier to temporarily boost their combined abilities, they would access the facility's central communication array and broadcast the classified files to multiple external authorities simultaneously. "The committee controls most communication channels," Reed warned, "but they can't block them all at once without raising immediate alarms. We'll have a small window of opportunity before they can implement countermeasures." Kalen and Lyra sat within the amplifier's interface chamber, connected both to each other and to the machine. Through their joined consciousness, they practiced focusing their abilities, finding the perfect balance where Kalen's electrical nature enhanced rather than overwhelmed Lyra's telepathic reach. As they worked, Kalen could feel something else developing between them, a deeper connection that went beyond their unusual abilities. In Lyra's mind, he found understanding, acceptance, and something that felt remarkably like love. Through their link, he knew she felt the same from him. Just as they were completing the final calibrations, the laboratory doors burst open. A specialized containment team in heavy protective gear stormed in, weapons raised. Behind them stood Counselor Mercer, his pristine white uniform a stark contrast to the tactical black of the security forces. "Dr. Reed," Mercer said coldly, "your access codes were revoked years ago. Did you think we wouldn't notice them being used in an abandoned sector?" Reed stepped forward, placing himself between the guards and the amplifier where Kalen and Lyra sat connected. "It's over, Mercer. The truth about the committee's experiments is about to reach the global authority." Mercer smiled thinly, a noble but futile gesture. "This facility is completely isolated from external networks. Your transmission will go nowhere." "Perhaps," Reed acknowledged, "but you've overlooked something important. And what might that be?" Mercer asked with contempt. You've spent so long thinking of them as separate weapons that you've failed to understand what they've become together. In the amplifier, Kalen and Lyra had not ceased their connection. Through the machine and each other, they had extended their awareness throughout the facility systems. They felt the guards' neural implants, the electronic locks on every door, the surveillance network, and most importantly, the supposedly isolated communication array. As one, they activated the amplifier. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Every electronic system in the facility responded to Kalen's electrical command, guided by Lyra's telepathic precision. Lights flickered, doors opened and closed, and most critically, all of the classified files began uploading to every connected system, internal and external. The guards' neural implants, designed to protect them from telepathic influence, became conduits for Lyra's abilities, amplified by Kalen's electrical boost. The men dropped their weapons, clutching their heads in confusion. Mercer backed away in horror as screens throughout the laboratory began displaying the evidence of the committee's crimes. Illegal experimentation, falsified safety concerns, plans for weaponization. "What have you done?" he whispered. "Created harmony from chaos," Lyra answered, her voice echoing with new power. "Brought truth from deception," Kalen added, blue energy coursing visibly through the air around them. Together, they rose from the amplifier, their combined aura creating a swirling pattern of light and shadow that filled the laboratory. Through their enhanced connection, they could feel the impact of their broadcast reaching beyond the facility. The shock of officials receiving the classified data, the mobilization of external authorities, the beginning of the committee's downfall. "This is just the beginning," Kalen said, addressing not just Mercer, but speaking through every communication device in the facility. His voice, layered with Lyra's harmonic tones, reached every room, every cell, every contained asset who had suffered under the committee's control. "We are not weapons. We are not monsters. We are simply different, and we will no longer be contained by your fear and lies." The amplifier, pushed beyond its design limitations, began to overheat and spark. With a final surge of their combined power, Kalen and Lyra disabled the facility's lethal defense systems and opened every secure door. Throughout the restricted zone, confused guards and free detainees began to move uncertainly through suddenly accessible corridors. Mercer, seeing his control literally opening before him, reached for a concealed weapon. Dr. Reed moved faster than his age would suggest possible, tackling the counselor to the ground. The weapon discharged, hitting Reed in the chest. "Go," the doctor gasped, holding Mercer down despite his wound. "The northeast exit. Security is lightest. Get beyond the perimeter before reinforcements arrive." Kalen wanted to help Reed, but Lyra's thoughts flowed into his. The doctor had made his choice, his penance. Their escape would give meaning to his sacrifice. With a final look of gratitude toward the man who had helped give them this chance, they fled, moving through the chaos of the facility with purpose. Other detainees, recognizing them from the facility-wide broadcast, moved aside or even helped delay guards they encountered. They reached the northeast perimeter as alarms continued to blare throughout the compound. The external gate, controlled by the same systems they had commanded, stood open. Beyond it lay the outskirts of Neo-Viridia, a city most of the detainees had not seen in years, if ever. Hand in hand, electrical energy and telepathic force still flowing between them in perfect harmony, Kalen and Lyra stepped beyond the boundaries of the restricted zone. Behind them, others began to follow, the first tentative steps of the contained moving into freedom. The future was uncertain. Neo-Viridia would not immediately welcome those it had been taught to fear. The committee, though exposed, still had influence. Their differences would still mark them as outsiders to many. But as they stood facing the city lights, Nexus, the little furry creature, somehow still with them. Clinging to Lyra's shoulder, Kalen felt something he had forgotten existed. Hope. "They'll come after us," he said quietly. "Try to recapture us, or worse." Lyra's tendrils shifted through confident colors of gold and silver. Together, They could not hold us. Together, they cannot reclaim us. She turned to him, those star-filled eyes reflecting the city lights. Why did you touch a monster like me? She asked again. But this time her harmonic voice carried no fear, only wonder. Kalen smiled, the blue glow of his veins pulsing in time with his heart. Because you were never a monster. Neither of us were. They needed us to believe we were monsters, so we would accept our cages. Around them, the first raindrops of an evening shower began to fall. Each droplet that touched their skin refracted their combined energy, his electricity, her psychic aura, creating tiny prisms of light that surrounded them like a constellation of earthbound stars. Where will we go? Lyra asked, looking at the vast city spread before them. Anywhere, Kalen answered, squeezing her hand gently. Everywhere. We'll find others like us. Build something new. Show the world that difference isn't something to fear or control. As they took their first steps toward the uncertain future, their joined hands created a visible circuit of blue-silver energy. Not destructive, but creative. Not chaotic, but harmonious. The supposed monsters, touched by love, stepped into freedom together. Above the city, the rain continued to fall, each drop capturing and reflecting the light of their unlikely union. A shower of stars guiding the path for those who dared to hope that understanding could replace fear and connection could heal even the deepest wounds of isolation.